Hey, I'd like to introduce to you our next youth, kids, and young adult pastor. Next on the Metal Pulpit. All right, hey, thanks for joining me for another Metal Pulpit. Okay, so I really don't have anyone to introduce, but those were the words I heard recently from a church here in my state, as this church was very excited about what they were doing. The youth, kids, and young adult pastor, one person doing all of these things. Those of you that know me and have listened to the Metal Pulpit know that I like to approach things happening within the church, a brick and mortar sort of building. I realize a lot of you don't go to church, and that's okay. My heart, though, is talking about things going on within the church, as I'm a pastor of a church in central Wisconsin. You know, there's a lot of kids that graduate high school and go off to Bible University. For me growing up, this was the thing. If you went to this church or part of this movement, then it was almost expected of you to go to this university in this neighboring state and pay now what is up to $26,000 a year in order to become a youth pastor, senior pastor, music pastor, kids pastor, blah, 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 on we go. Now think about that for a little bit, because the average church size, according to George Barna reports, is that it is about 100 people or less. The church I pastor falls in that demographic. And yet these kids are being pushed into these universities, hyped up to go through it, and they come out with over $100,000 in debt, only to go into a church that, at best, they'll get a meager full-time salary, but usually part-time or gas money, okay? And yet I get these videos, I see these videos of these pastors saying, I want you to meet our newest youth, kids, young adult pastor. And I'm looking at that guy and I'm saying, God be with you, because you are going to burn out. And I say that from the words of somebody who was that. The church I served at in the city before I moved here, I was youth pastor, kids pastor, senior citizen overseer. I did all of these things, and associate pastor. Well, that raises all kinds of questions when you start doing these sort of things. Questions that I started to ask towards the end of my stay at that position, where I was asking, and what is it the senior pastor does? Because in these scenarios, we tend to push off so much, and usually these senior pastors also have a secretary. So what do they do all week? Well, they seek the Lord and prepare a message for the church to hear. That takes all week. I understand they do a few hospital visits, maybe get involved in something here and there, but they have this one position, and then they shove everything else on their staff person. And meanwhile, the staff person's trying to appease, trying to keep things going, trying to grow the church, because they're usually told if they grow the church, their salary's going to go up, blah, 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 on we go. You know, if you're in a church and you're on staff at a church, don't burn out. Just don't burn out. It's not worth it. You know, there's a lot of times that a church can get by with simply having volunteers. If you're a senior pastor and you've hired somebody to do all of these roles, shame on you. You know, the fact is, I have a kids pastor at my church. That's all I ask of him. Granted, I fall in that demographic of a meager salary for this guy. But I asked him to do kids ministry. I would not ask him to do anything else. I'm not going to ask him to be on the worship team. Yes, he can play a bass, but you know what? He has a family. He has his own sanity. He works a job, and it's just not right. And so we ought to lower our expectations of our staff in churches. And if you're volunteering over and over and over and over and over again, or if you're on staff somewhere and they keep piling positions on you, raise your finger and say, I have a question. Or be very transparent and say, I'm burning out, because it's not worth it. It really is not worth it. The church will be okay without a kids ministry. You hear what I'm saying there? The church will be okay without a youth ministry. I'll be honest with you, we don't have a youth pastor. But you know what? We have a few kids that go to a neighboring youth group and they love it. But at the same time, our church is the type where youth love it, and they love being a part of it, and they like being plugged in. We do things that they enjoy. Yeah, it's not per se youth geared, but they really do enjoy it. So when we hear somebody say, I'd like to introduce you to our newest staff member, and there's a ton of roles behind that, or if you're looking to get on staff at a church and they want to tag on a bunch of different roles, be very careful. It's not worth it. And I'm speaking from experience. A lot of our sanctuary pastors are speaking from it, have come from that experience where you will burn out and you will look back on your life and say, I did not take care of myself. I don't even know who I am anymore, because you need to narrow in on one or two things and do it well. That's what God's called you to do. If God's called you to work with youth, work with youth. If God's called you to work with the 20, 30-somethings, work with them. But it's not worth burning out. God's church made it this far without you. It's going to be okay if you can't fulfill all of those roles. Hey, shoot me your thoughts, pastorbobadams@gmail.com, and I will be sure to get back to them or address them right here on the Metal Pulpit. Hey, also be sure to check out our online radio station, our metal channel, intenseradio.com. Stop over to wearemetalwearefamily.com and visit the metal shop, where you can buy Pastor Bob's Headbangers Brew Coffee and so many other cool things going on there. Pastor Scott Heron doing a knockout job with that. So take care.